Capitalism's a religion that makes Satan a god.
To countless fans, Immortal Technique is a revolutionary rapper. Those hearing him for the first time will notice it's not your conventional packaged and branded hip-hop.
Who really made Bin Laden the man that he is? The CIA.
Tech is as much an artist as he is a political activist. Lyrically tackling issues like war, poverty, and racism, this New Yorker makes no apologies for his words or perspectives.
Most, if not all, of your lyrics focus on political issues and socioeconomic inequalities that are taking place domestically and internationally. At this point in time, with all the problems mounting up all over the world, what are you focusing on?
Most recently, one of the larger things that I was focused on was the situation in Afghanistan. And actually, we had this conversation off camera, so we'll just get into it right now. The litmus test that is provided for our justification of invasion of another country. I think that while a lot of people would question our entrance into Iraq, and they said we should have never gone to Iraq, we should have never gone to this country, never. There's some people that say we showed up to Bosnia too late, you know, we should have gone there earlier. And the question is, well, what is the litmus test? When should we invade? Some people say, oh, well, what about Rwanda? Shouldn't we have gone there? So at some point we have to confront the circumstances that are behind when the United States of America finally releases its military force to aid or to topple a regime. And I don't think that that's clearly defined. I think that there are talking points people come up with to say, all right, this person's a bad person, this person's a dictator, they treat their people terribly. That's fine, but we also are at peace and we support plenty of dictators who treat their people horribly. And we have done that systematically over the years. We used our Cold War with Russia in the past to justify behavior like this, claiming that if we didn't, all of a sudden it would fall to the communists and the economy would turn into a wash for us, that we wouldn't have access to any natural resources, everything would be nationalized. And now I don't think that we can really use that excuse anymore, so we come up with other ones. Oh, they're going to be taken over, they'll become a safe haven for terrorism or whatever it may be. But I think that as time progresses with any occupation, it begins to be revealed what the real reasons for us invading a country are, and they're to benefit us and to benefit our corporations rather than the safety of the civilians either there or here.
Well, the reason that was given to the American people and the world at large for the U.S. Invading Afghanistan was 9/11. Was that following the September 11th attacks, the American administration said that Osama bin Laden was responsible for the attacks on America.
I would believe and I would completely concur if we had actually finished the job there when we had had the chance, instead of pulling out and then coming up with 7 different reasons for invading Iraq. You know, first one didn't work out because they didn't have a nuclear weapon, which I remind people that was the catchphrase. They might be able to develop a nuclear capability, and nuclear, or as George Bush said, a nuclear, you know, whatever it may be, but that was continuously drilled into the heads of the American public. Then when nuclear was ruled out, chemical weapons. Oh, well, he might have chemical weapons. Well, if he has any left over from the ones that we helped him stockpile, then that would be a concern for the surrounding area. But then all of a sudden it became, okay, though there's no large, huge stockpiles of chemical, biological weapons, so now we're trying to help the people. Now this is a democratization effort. So I think that when we look back, we can find justifications for certain things, and I think that if we wanted to address the Taliban and how wicked they were to their people, why weren't we doing that in 2001 when we were giving them millions and millions of dollars to supposedly destroy their poppy crops, or inviting them here as foreign diplomats without the full criticism of the administration at the time?
I read that you said that 9/11 was a crime with a motive. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that when we talk about 9/11, I myself don't like to give into conspiracy. So I just say that while I can't come here and say to people, oh, I know exactly what happened, that I know that the government's version is definitely not true, because they couldn't even tell the truth about the air to breathe after that occurred. They said that it was safe, that it was fine. And then when people developed these respiratory illnesses, and a lot of the first responders got very, very sick, some of them died, they went into full deniability mode. So someone that can't even tell me the truth about whether I can breathe this air or not, it really makes me question what else they said. You know, when I talk about it having a motive, I think that it was used as a catalyst to justify several other actions, or countless numbers of actions, I should say.
Such as war?
Not just war, but consolidation of power within America. The war on the outside, I think, is more of a distraction, unfortunately, for the American people to kind of look and point at and even rally in the streets about. But even if you go to a rally, and this is not a criticism of activism by any means, only a helpful hand to educate more people and make them understand that, look, even if we do 100,000, 500,000 people in front of Washington protesting a war, at the end of the day, what did we do? We spent a lot of gas money getting there. We helped the local economy by buying all that food that we did when we went there. And what did we really achieve? Moving people from one place to another. We're not really speaking their language. Their language is money, you know? And what they do over and over is take a action that occurs outside of this country, and while the public is completely focused on that, begin to reorganize what's happening here in America with the Patriot Act, with going after people who have some sort of criticism of America, with discrediting individuals who would even question the smallest concern that they have in terms of what the government's doing behind closed doors.
I read following Obama's victory, his election a year ago, that you said it was necessary for America to not follow the footsteps of the Roman Empire. It's been 1 year since he's been elected. Do you feel that his leadership has changed America's trajectory in any way? I
don't know Mr. Obama personally, so I can't make personal attacks about who he is and his character as a man. I've never sat down and had a conversation with him. But if I examine his foreign policy and I see that really the mission hasn't changed that much, that we've diverted troops from Iraq and then put them back into Afghanistan, that our troop strength there is almost equal to the amount of troops that the Russians had during the height of their occupation, that in fact when I went to Afghanistan, people were more resentful towards Americans than they were towards the legacy of Russia, even though that occupation was a lot more violent. And I think that's where I would kind of begin to really get into what I think about Obama, that if you look at it, what has really changed? You know, that fact that he got a Nobel Peace Prize, I don't think is indicative of change. I think that's the left of Europe putting pressure on him and saying, hey, you know what? You know, your generals that are obviously bought by the right wing can put pressure on you in this way and release reports that say you must send more troops to Afghanistan, otherwise we're going to fail. And what kind of position does that put Obama in? It puts him in a position that he looks weak to the right and weak to the left by not sending more troops in when he's taking advice from the same people that were supposed to give George Bush advice that he didn't listen to about Iraq. So what's their response? We're going to give you a Nobel Peace Prize. Now how the do you look sending 30,000 more troops and God knows how many mercenaries into that country?
How did you end up fusing this passion that you have and this deep knowledge with your music? How did that come together? Because
I feel like our people would benefit from understanding that a little bit more about themselves. Because I wanted to know the origin of things. I wanted to know how we became a Christian nation. I even wanted to know how the people of Russia initially became a Christian nation. And then I discovered, okay, well, the Byzantine Emperor Basil II, he was at war with the Bulgars, and he went to Vladimir I, and he said, hey, I'll give you my daughter Anna if you Christianize your people. And Vladimir, being the intelligent Vladimir of Kiev that he was, said, hey, you know what? I've researched all of these other religions. None of them consolidates power the way this one does. And because we both share an area near the same sea, and we can both use each other, I'll even send you 6,000 of my Varangians, and we'll call it a day. Deal done. But it explains a lot of how religion and how politics work in conjunction with one another. It explains how peoples are unified by the same cause, and how sometimes, whether we choose to realize it or not, we have more things in common than we do apart. We all want the same things, and yet there are people who are in charge of our government who aren't satisfied with us wanting the same things. And by the same things, I don't mean the same shirt to wear. I don't mean the American exaggeration of what socialism or communism is. I don't believe that we should give in to one standard or another. I think it should be measured based upon what a population decides and not have some controlling interest from a foreign country or a foreign corporation, because all corporations are foreign, really. They deal with a small, tiny island nation of people who decide things for others. I grew this passion because of that desire to make a connection between one and the other. And the more it became clearer and clearer how one affected the other, the more I decided to dig deeper and deeper into it. And I love when I'm proved wrong, and I love putting my ideas out there and having them debated, because I feel like it gives me a chance to grow personally as well.
You have been offered to sign with labels a few times, a couple of times, and thus far you have not signed with any big labels that many would consider a very lucrative opportunity. How come you don't want to sign on with any labels?
I think that they would take the creative control completely out of my hands. I want to let people know what a record label is. A record label is a loan with horrible interest rates, where you don't even get to keep the property. You know, you don't get to keep your masters or your publishing. The majority of the time it's snatched out of your hands. You deliver a product of about 25 songs and they pick 12 or 14 of them, and then they decide to create a marketing image around who you are. And I think that that's disingenuous. For me personally. For other people, they don't have a problem doing that because they see it as an actor would, or they see it as a stage performer would. I was born a revolutionary, and that's what I'm going to be to the day that I die. I see the reality and I see the sacrifice that's needed for it, and that's what I remind people about. And that's why I go to the places that I've gone to. That's why I'm in North Africa. That's why I go to Colombia. You know what I mean? That's why I've been to Afghanistan. That's why I go to these places and I set up foundations to try and help these people that are victims of an occupation. Not because I share or pledge allegiance to one ideology over another. It's specifically because I don't want my politics controlled by somebody else. And also, to be quite honest, I'm making a lot more money independently than I would getting 13 cents a record.
What's next for your music?
I'm working on a new album called The Middle Passage. And I'm also working on a documentary called Urban Warfare, which details the rise of how I actually made it independently, what sacrifices I had to personally make, my travels around the world. I recently used the proceeds of the Third World album, the last one I did, to build an orphanage and a school in Kabul, and I went there myself to actually set it up, which is where I encountered all of these experiences. I, as a human being, have certain limitations on what I can do, but I think that I dedicate all that I have to revolutionary music and to the study of overturning an unjust system in the search for something better.
Immortal Technique, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me here. До свидания.